And I guess we'll start on my left with you, Ms. Whiten, with the Building Alberta Association. If you're ready to go,
I'm ready to go.
We can start the other side as well, don't matter.
No, this
go
is
ahead.
Good. Thank you very much for including me in today's meeting. As was already stated, my name is Carmen Whiten, and I'm the CEO of Build Alberta, which is the Building Industry and Land Development Association of Alberta. Build Alberta represents more than 1,800 member companies involved in residential construction, land development, renovations, trades, consulting, and materials supply. I'm here to discuss housing affordability in Alberta, the implications of the National Housing Strategy, and federal policies that are impacting jobs, the economy, and the environment. The industry I represent is mostly small to medium-sized, privately held businesses that employ more than 120,000 Albertans, provides $8.3 billion in wages, and contributes $18.6 billion in economic activity. These are Canadian employers whose livelihood is being put at risk due to policies created to address issues that are not relevant in Alberta. Alberta's residential construction industry is in crisis. The majority of our members have reported layoffs of more than 20% of their staff and have significantly reduced work orders, while some have simply gone out of business. There are 3 conditions that have resulted in a significant contraction of business, job loss, and economic uncertainty, and these are the 2017-18 mortgage rule changes, a historic oversupply of new housing inventory, and building code changes, especially related to energy efficiency. With respect to mortgage rules, housing in Alberta's major cities is not the same as it is in Vancouver and Toronto. We are facing a historic high rate of unabsorbed housing. Since the introduction of those mortgage rules, the amount of newly built but vacant homes has increased by 44%. The majority of these homes are single-family, semi-detached, and row houses designed for young families, first-time home buyers, and those looking to moderately move up in the market. We also know that 70% of Alberta households can comfortably afford homes priced at $300,000. And unlike Toronto and Vancouver, there are many desirable housing options in Alberta's major cities within that price range. But new mortgage rules are preventing working Albertans from qualifying. As a result, Alberta has a record high of 5,400 newly built but unsold homes. And a year-to-date decline in housing starts already reporting at 22% lower than it was in 2017. If people don't buy, builders don't build, and Albertans won't work. As you consider housing for all Canadians, we ask that you bring back the 30-year mortgage, implement incentives for first-time homebuyers, and facilitate regional variances in mortgage rules that will allow provincial financial institutions to provide for their local markets. And with respect to building codes, maintaining housing affordability is a central focus for Build Alberta. We have concerns with the speed in which substantial shifts in building codes relative to energy efficiency are occurring. Alberta builders are already leaders in energy efficiency and have been providing innovative options that consumers want and, more importantly, that they can afford. The challenge with the current trajectory for energy efficiency and net zero by 2030 is the pace and uncertainty of associated costs. It is essential that a thorough cost impact analysis is undertaken and variables associated with climate conditions across Canada are considered to avoid costly unintended consequences to homeowners. We calculated that every $10,000 increase to a home removes 20,000 Alberta households from entry-level housing. A net zero-ready home in Edmonton will be tens of thousands more, and in Northern Alberta, still more. Build Alberta fully supports a path to net zero homes. However, before moving forward with drastic shifts in energy efficiency, we need to take a prudent approach to determine cost impacts, implications on building science, and consumer interests. Industry and government need to innovate together to find more cost-effective means to reach such levels of efficiency before they can be regulated. Albertans simply cannot afford to go to such extremes without proof that there is market capacity, technical capabilities, and consumer willingness to adapt. And in closing, the National Housing Strategy is largely focused on social and subsidized housing without consideration for the consequences of other federal policies such as mortgage rules and building codes. Federal policies must reflect conditions relevant to all of Canada's largest cities and support housing for all Albertans, all Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Turning then to the Canadian Home Builders Association, Kevin Lee, CEO. Welcome, Kevin.
CHBA represents some 9,000 member companies from coast to coast and is the national voice of the residential construction sector. Build Alberta is a constituent association of CHBA, and as Carmen has spoken to the specifics of Alberta, I'll speak to the housing issues on a national basis that are found in Bill C-97. From a guiding principles level, CHBA has one key amendment to recommend to the committee regarding the bill. Our recommendation relates directly to the issue of housing affordability, a top-of-mind issue for Canadians from coast to coast. As all of you know, inability to access home ownership affects constituents in all of your respective ridings, especially young and new Canadians who aspire to realize the dream of home ownership. Deteriorating market rate affordability also has severe impacts on housing initiatives for those in core housing need. We therefore propose that the second paragraph of the preamble of the National Housing Strategy Act be amended from the current wording, which reads, whereas access to affordable housing contributes to achieving beneficial social, economic, health, and environmental outcomes, and adjust this to capture the full housing continuum, including market rate housing, as follows, whereas both housing affordability and access to affordable housing by those in need contributes to achieving beneficial social, economic, health, and environmental outcomes. We feel that this amendment would better capture the true housing challenges facing Canadians, preventing a focus solely on social housing and instead also including addressing housing affordability for those seeking to join the middle class and home ownership. Indeed, without addressing housing affordability, Canada's social housing challenges will get worse. The inability of renters to access home ownership is clogging up the housing continuum, limiting rental unit availability, driving up rents, and causing more challenges for those in housing need, as well as those organizations seeking to provide it. For the National Housing Strategy to be complete, it must also address market rate housing affordability, especially for first-time buyers. This is particularly true given the affordability challenges now facing millennials and new Canadians. The strategy and government actions should address the issues driving up costs, smart mortgage rules that address risks without locking too many Canadians out of home ownership, market rate housing supply, transit-oriented development, and more. Regarding smart mortgage rules, CHBA advises that the compounding effect of many mortgage rule changes have now gone too far. We are seeing those effects in job losses, weakening economies, and the financial challenges now facing millennials. The proposed first-time homebuyer incentive is a potentially effective measure to both expand affordability and market accessibility for some, particularly those stuck perpetually in rental. CHBA has provided CMHC with our initial design recommendations accordingly. The problem is that this incentive will not be in place until the fall at the earliest, leaving many markets with severe challenges this construction season, including having some buyers delay their purchases until the incentive is available. And even once in place, the incentive will still leave thousands of prospective and well-qualified first-time buyers on the sidelines because of the excessively stringent mortgage rules still in place, the impacts of which remain to play out. We therefore continue to recommend two key additional steps to unlock the door to homeownership right now. Adjust the stress test to reflect current economic conditions, and restore 30-year amortizations on insured mortgages for well-qualified first-time buyers seeking entry-level homes. The stress test has excessively suppressed the market. Between it and rising interest rates, CHBA estimates that 147,000 potential buyers have been knocked out of the market since it was introduced. And while some suggest the impact of the stress test is now fading, our data tells us differently. The Bank of Canada's most recent forecast shows a 0.3% decline in Canada's GDP for 2019, directly associated with housing activity, amounting to a drop of about $6.7 billion. What is worrisome is that this is the fourth downward revision recently by the bank, based on greater than expected declining housing trends that were not anticipated by the bank's model previously. Our data confirms this and points to the continuing slide caused by the compounding mortgage rule changes. Since the beginning of 2019, we have surveyed members on 2 occasions on the effects of the stress test. In January, our members reported a 33% drop in first-time homebuyer activity this past year. This drop in buyers has yet to fully play out in terms of housing starts. The second survey in April revealed that some 65% of the 3,300 CHBA member companies responding have already laid off staff, and 40% expect to lay off more workers in the next few months. This at a time when the government recognizes we need more, not less, housing supply. Our recommendations to adjust the stress test and restore 30-year insure mortgages for first-time buyers, which, like the incentive program, could even have an income-to-price ceiling, would get the continuum and industry functioning properly again without increasing risk excessively. In short, it's time for the National Housing Strategy to address not only those in core housing need, but the housing aspirations of hundreds of thousands of well-qualified buyers currently locked out of the market. This affects not only their financial prospects, but those of local economies and jobs across Canada. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer questions afterwards.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee, thank you for being here. We've obviously worked together on the housing affordability front, doing a lot of work there. I am in agreement with you in terms of the 30-year mortgages for insured first-time buyers. I think that's a segment of the market that is important. It's important in my constituency and my stakeholders, and it's important for a lot of millennials and young Canadian families. But with regards to our budget and with regards to the measure we've implemented, shared equity mortgages have been introduced in other parts of the world, have worked very, very well, provide really a lower, at the end of the day, a lower mortgage amount for individuals, and the potential over the next 3 years for over 100,000 new home buyers to come into the Canadian market. So it is a step, a big step. It's actually transformational in the market. And at the same time, there's always more to be done. But you would have to acknowledge on that front there that this is a policy measure that's definitely worthy of some congratulations for sure, but also definitely worthy of being taken up by Canadians in the months ahead.
Mr. Lee. And Ms. Watton, too, if you wait, and if both of you want to go ahead.
Sure. Well, with respect to the shared equity mortgages, turn this on. With respect to the shared equity mortgages, it is in fact something that CHBA has recommended to this government and to other institutions as well. We think it's a huge opportunity to be exploited to help, especially those perpetually stuck in rent, and that's where we've seen it. We did a study of all kinds of programs across Canada to help people out of perpetual rent and into home ownership, and shared equity mortgages is the number one way. So, and to your point, is it a valid program? Absolutely. Our challenge now is that will only address a small portion of the market. We certainly would hope that the projections are right, that it'll help up to 100,000 people over the next 3 years. We're not sure that will actually be achievable under the current circumstances. In the meantime, we do see still a need for the 30-year amortization for insured mortgages to help the rest of the market.
And Kevin, I want to interject really quickly with Chair. 10 words.
You're at a time. I'm going to let Ms. Watton speak. Do you want to in?
I'm completely in agreement with what Kevin said. It's great to be addressing that entry level, getting out of rental into home ownership, but it's equally as important that we serve the entire housing continuum and create programs that allow people to continually, moderately upgrade their housing situation, because that's how the system works. And we are sitting in bottlenecks right now in terms of unabsorbed housing, and this is a good step, but it's not quite enough. I think that's been very well stated.
Mr. Commish. We'll get a chance maybe at the end, Francesco.
Maybe at the end. So just like my colleague on the other side called this transformational, but CMHC, which is responsible for running it, has called it working on the margins. The first time I see a transformational program where the person responsible for rolling it out has called it working at the margins only, and it's in the decimal points they estimate will have an impact on the market. To go over some of the stats that you raised, Mr. Lee, 147,000, according to you, were knocked out of the market because of B20?
Yeah, a combination of B20, and since then interest rates have risen, knocking out still more with B20 and the interest rates combined, yeah.
And you said it was an April survey, 65% of CHBA companies and organizations had started to lay off employees.
Yeah, we did a national survey, and of our 300 member companies that responded, 2/3 of them were responding that they had already laid off.
So how many people is that in total?
We don't have those stats.
Don't have those stats. Ms. Whiten, correct me if I'm wrong, but what's the percentage of in all the construction workers in the province of Alberta, what's the percentage of those who are in residential construction?
35% is in residential construction compared to 12% in non-residential and 16% in industrial construction. So it really is a huge enabler to the economy and to well-being that is often overlooked. But it is about jobs in the economy.
So my question then is to both of you, because both of you work so closely with builders or are the builders of units in this country. Were either of you consulted before the shared equity mortgage program announcement was made?
We were actually in discussions with CMHC about a shared equity mortgage program, but not applied in this nature. Again, it was more of a hand-up type program for people in core housing need, not something that we expected was sort of for the typical entry-level market person who would normally be able to, or family who would normally be able to not need a special program, but just basic mortgage rules.
And you mentioned that you had made suggestions of what the program should look like. Did you have any details to share with us on what you thought CMHC should be doing? Because I'll let you know, like, they came before the committee and they were their CEOs before public accounts, and they had no clue and no details. And the board of CMHC found out that they were doing shared equity mortgages the night of the budget. That's a quote from the CEO of CMHC. Mm-hmm. Do you have any details on the program, or perhaps what you suggested they should do?
Well, we wouldn't really have those details. We made our recommendations on this, again, for a different type of program. Our recommendation with respect to first-time homebuyers that would be more typical would be 30-year insured mortgages, adjustments to the stress test, that sort of thing.
Do you think the impact of B20 on the market will be offset by these shared equity mortgages? And Ms. Whitten, you can comment on that as well.
No. It's aimed at a different part of the market. As you said, it's a sort of more on the fringes. B20 is flat out the entire market.
Ms. Whitten, can I get you to comment on Alberta specifically? Because we don't hear enough about Alberta here.
I would agree with Kevin. This isn't going to change the situation in Alberta. As Kevin said, people are being laid off. Small contractors are going out of business. And this will not be the fix to that. The only thing that is going to turn that around is a restoration of consumer confidence. Some of that is coming back because the economy is coming back around. But without a change to the mortgage rules, without a change to the stress test, there are tens of thousands of Albertans, working Albertans, that still are not going to qualify for a mortgage. And if they can't buy, the builders won't build and jobs will go away.
So on just B20 specific to Alberta, do you think one size fits all policymaking coming out of Ottawa is the way to go? What kind of changes would you like to see to B20?
Well, one of the opportunities we have in Alberta is that we've been working with credit unions and the Alberta Treasury Branch, our provincial financial institutions, but because of the way national banking rules are written and federal policies are written, there isn't that avenue to create a local market response. And so if the B20 isn't going to change, then some flexibility with respect to recognizing regional differences will be critical.
To Mr. Lee, you're in the housing business. You in Ontario, in Toronto and Vancouver, we have a housing affordability crisis. Do you believe that governmental restrictions, development charges, zoning obstacles, and other red tape are part of the reason why housing is so inaccessible to people of limited means in those two markets?
Absolutely. Development taxes are a huge part of why housing is so expensive. Regulation and red tape slows things down, further adding to those costs. Regulation, red tape, and zoning restrictions that have resulted in a lack of supply are probably the biggest thing that's driven up prices in both of those markets because of good old simple supply and demand. So those are all part of the equation.
Well, we had this Looney Tune here from the other day from the UN who refused to.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Chair.
Well, okay, I will restrain. I will use those comments only outside of the committee. She refused to acknowledge that zoning restrictions are the leading obstacle to low-income people and minorities getting access to good job opportunities in major metropolitan centers. So it is good for you to see someone who represents the industry confirming that those restrictions are in fact a leading cause, and we need to speak out strongly against snob zoning and other obstacles that keep people from jobs and keep them living in poverty.